Rowan Hale saw them when his horse began to slow down. In the middle of the clearing stood a rough wooden frame, hastily built like a livestock rack, and on it 5 Apache women hanging upside down. Blood had rushed to their heads. Their black hair dangled, brushing against the hot sand. Their bodies were large, muscular, tense, still alive. Not the victim's frail body, but the bodies of people who had endured far too much. One of them still had her eyes open. That look was not a plea for help. It was pure rage, barely contained. Rowan did not curse. He did not shout. He walked forward, drew his knife, and cut them down one by one. Their bodies hit the ground with heavy thuds, gasping for air, bruised and battered, but not a single one cried. The first to get up was the one in the middle. She staggered, then steadied herself, though her head was still spinning. Her eyes locked on Rowan. "What are you planning to do next?" Her voice was not weak. Rowan swallowed hard. "Get you out of here." She let out a dry laugh, the kind only someone who had been hung upside down and still had enough pride left to reject pity could give. She stepped forward, a wound bleeding onto the sand. "We have something we need to do first." The other 4 rose behind her, silent as stone. No one said thank you. No one asked his name. Rowan looked at the 5 women standing in the desert, bodies that had been strung up like animals, but eyes that refused to bow, and he understood. What he had just cut was not just rope. It was the beginning of a hunt. They did not leave right away. The 5 Apache women sat down in the meager shade of the wooden frame. Their backs resting against the beams like trees that had been struck by lightning, but had not yet fallen. Their breathing was heavy and deep, each breath pulling life back up from their throats. The bleeding had stopped, but their heads still spun from being hung upside down for too long. Rowan kept his distance, not out of fear, but because he understood. Women like them did not need a man standing too close. The woman in the middle, the one who had looked at him first, wiped the blood from her forehead with a large, calloused hand. Her shoulders were broad, her arms veined and strong, her body marked by years of labor and battle. She looked at the other 4, gave a small nod. No one asked if they were all right. No one panicked. They were so familiar with pain. It had become the ground they walked on. "My name is Kayla," she said, finally turning back toward Rowan. "Rowan, you do not need to know the names of the others," Kayla replied. "If we die on the way, you will not have to remember." Rowan did not argue. He simply took his water pouch, placed it on the ground, then stepped back 2 paces. Kayla picked it up, took a long drink, and passed it to the next woman. No one drank in a hurry. They drank like people who knew the road ahead would be long. When enough strength had returned for them to stand steady, Kayla spoke again. "We are 5 of 7 sisters." Rowan stayed quiet, waiting. 7 years ago, our entire village was slaughtered, Kayla said, her voice steady, unshaken. 2 of us died that night. The rest of us survived because we were taken. Who did it? The man who raised us. The answer dropped onto the sand like a heavy stone. Iman Crow, Kayla said. Stepfather. Rowan looked into her eyes. There was no fire of hatred, only something colder. He sold out our village for land. Kayla continued. Sold all 7 of his wife's daughters to make sure no one came back. One of the 4 behind her let out a dry, broken laugh. Today, Kayla said, he wanted to make sure we never came back, so he hung us upside down to see if there was anything human left. Rowan felt his throat go dry. And now, he asked. Kayla stood tall. Even with the dizziness still lingering, she stood firm, towering in the desert. Now we go back. Rowan looked at the 5 women standing in a line. No guns, no horses. Their bodies still aching, but their eyes were like arrows drawn tight in the bow. And he understood the most important thing. They did not need a savior. They needed a path. Rowan turned around and brought his horse closer. If you are going, he said, go ahead of me. Kayla looked at him for a long moment, then gave a nod. The 5 women began to walk, leaving behind the empty wooden frame, the place where they had once been hung like animals, and Rowan followed them, asking no more questions, because there are some journeys where the only question is, do you have the courage to follow? They began walking when the sun tilted west. The 5 Apache women led the way, their steps heavy but sure, leaving deep prints in the sand like unspoken vows. Rowan Hale followed behind just as he had promised, not pushing ahead, not asking for directions, not rushing them. He simply watched how they moved, slow, but without hesitation. Like people who had made up their minds a long time ago, Kayla did not look back. She knew he was still there, and that was enough. The desert slowly began to change. The fine sand gave way to hardened earth and sharp stones. One of the 4 women, broad shoulders, arms covered in scars, stopped, bent down to touch the ground, then motioned for a change in direction. No explanation, no debate. Rowan realized they tracked like people born to hunt. By midday, the sun was so intense the air itself seemed to tremble. One of the women staggered, her knees buckling. Kayla turned instantly, catching her by the shoulder. No embrace, no soothing words, just a firm hand, steady enough to keep her upright. Rowan stepped forward, reaching for his water pouch. Kayla looked at him, measuring. He placed the pouch on the ground and stepped back. After a few moments of silence, Kayla gave a nod. The water was shared evenly. No one drank more than their share. Rowan felt the dryness burning his own throat, but he did not ask for more. Sometimes silence is the only way to be accepted. By afternoon, they found old wagon tracks etched deep into the ground, the marks of a heavy supply cart. Kayla knelt down, touched the groove, then stood up. "Iman Crow," she said, "he is gathering people." Rowan tightened his grip on the rifle strap. "He knows you are still alive." "He has always known," Kayla answered. "He just was not sure we would dare come back." That sentence weighed heavier than the desert sun. As the sky began to darken, they stopped to rest. No big fire, just a small flame for warmth. Kayla sat with her back to Rowan, but this time she did not ask him to sit apart. A small sign, but Rowan noticed. Night fell. Wind swept across the desert, carrying the scent of dust and dried blood. Rowan lay on his back, staring up at the stars, listening to the steady breathing of the 5 women around him. And he understood something. He was no longer following them out of curiosity. He followed because if he turned back now, he would no longer be himself. And ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a stepfather was waiting, unaware that the ones he hung upside down were walking straight toward him. Night fell like a black cloth draped over the desert. Wind slipped through the cracks in the rocks, carrying the scent of dry earth, and something older, the smell of memories that had not yet been buried. They stopped in a shallow rock basin, low enough to keep their shadows hidden. Kayla crouched down and drew a short line in the sand with the tip of her knife, then added 2 crossed marks. The other 4 nodded and spread out, checking the perimeter like compass needles, long trained to point toward death. Rowan stayed still. He had learned how to stand still in the right place. Kayla turned back to him, her voice low. "Iman Crow will not show himself right away. He is afraid." "No," she answered. "He believes we would never dare to come." Rowan looked into her eyes and saw that cold gleam. The look of someone who knows their enemy too well. 7 years ago, Kayla continued, he called us his daughters, told us to stand behind him, told us to close our eyes. She paused. The wind whistled through, rolling sand across the rocks with a sound like whispers from that night. When we opened our eyes, the village was burning. 2 of my sisters were left beneath the cottonwood tree. No one asked for their names. There was no need. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. He had heard stories like this before, but never from the voice of someone who survived them. One of the 4 women approached, a coil of old rope over her shoulder, the very same rope they had been hung with. "He holds the land. He holds the people. He holds the silence." Kayla nodded. "And he will keep holding it unless we take it back." Rowan spoke up slowly. "If you want me to turn back." "No." Kayla cut in. "If you are going to turn back, do it now. Rowan did not move. She looked at him for the length of a breath, then said something he did not expect. "Tomorrow, when we enter the camp, do not stand in front of us." Rowan understood. It was not a warning. It was a line. "I will stand where I should," he said. Kayla turned away and signaled for a short rest. No one said another word. The night deepened. The sky filled with stars like an old map for those who knew how to read it. Rowan lay on his back, one hand on the earth, feeling the chill seep through his coat. He thought about the things people called law, order, and family, and realized how thin they were, like sand. When you stood on the wrong side before dawn, Kayla rose to her feet. "We go." They left the basin, silent as shadows cut from the night. In the distance, the camp lights of Ian Crow flickered a small, confident glow as if it had never hung 5 bodies upside down under the sun. Rowan followed behind, keeping the distance. He knew from this moment on there was no turning back, and the man once called father was about to be called nothing at all. Ian Crow's camp crouched between 2 ridges of dry rock like an old beast, still believing the darkness was on its side. A flickering oil lamp hung in front of the main tent, casting light on shadowy figures drifting about. Hired hands, gunmen, men who believed that money and firepower could replace everything else. Kayla signaled a halt. The 5 Apache women pressed close to the rock, their large bodies melting into the night so naturally it was almost terrifying. No one breathed hard. No one moved fast. They were used to waiting for the exact moment because a heartbeat too late could mean death. And so could a heartbeat too soon. Rowan crouched low behind them, his eyes sweeping across the camp. He saw the horse corral, the supply shed, a makeshift watch post. No badges, no law, only land, guns, and men who thought they were untouchable. Kayla tilted her head, her voice barely a whisper. "This is not a place for trials." Rowan understood. There would be no arrests, no accusations, only an ending. One of the women brought back. Cloth wrapped around her wrists crawled forward like a living log. She disappeared behind a stack of crates. A few breaths later, the light at the eastern end of the camp went dark. Kayla raised 2 fingers. 2 more shadows split off, circling west. Rowan noticed how they moved. No names, no orders. They were something forged by loss. A guard turned his back at just the wrong moment. The rope snapped out clean, silent. The body hit the sand like an empty sack. Rowan felt his hands tighten. Instinct urged him to step forward, to protect, to do what a man like him had always done in the face of violence. But he remembered Kayla's words. "Do not stand in front of us." He stayed still. And in that moment, Rowan understood something he had spent his whole life avoiding. There are forms of justice that do not need outsiders to validate them. A faint sound came from the main tent. A man's voice laughing. Old horsero and confident, Kayla looked toward it. Her expression did not change. No flaring hatred, just the pure focus of someone who had come too far to turn around. "Now he is in there," she said. Rowan took a deep breath. "Where do I stand?" Kayla turned to him, and for the first time, her eyes were not cold. "You stand behind us. So if anyone runs, you are the last door." Rowan nodded. They moved as one. 5 shadows closing in around the main tent, like a slow, tightening loop. The wind picked up, making the canvas walls billow like lungs, preparing for a final breath. Inside, Ian Crow still did not know that the ones he had once hung upside down under the sun had arrived in a place beyond the reach of law, where reckoning finds its own way home. Thank you for being here with me. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel to show your support. I truly hope you find peace and happiness wherever in the world you are listening from. The wind shifted. The canvas of the tent in front of them fluttered harder as if the desert itself were holding its breath. Kayla raised a clenched fist. All 5 stopped at once. Not a single pebble rolled. Not a single breath wasted. Inside the tent, Iman Crow's voice drifted out in slow, speaking about land, about borders, about the things he believed would outlast blood. Kayla gave the signal. 2 shadows broke left. 1 circled right. The other 2 moved straight in. The way they moved was not the way of mercenaries. It was the way of those who had learned to hunt in the dark since childhood. Rowan held his position behind them. Hand on his rifle, eyes locked on the only way out of the camp. He could hear his own heartbeat, not from fear, but from something heavier. The sense that he now stood inside something that could never be undone. A faint tearing sound, a blade slicing through canvas. The first shadow slipped inside. No screams, no chaos. One of the hired men turned too late. He was taken down, mouth covered, his big frame jolting once before going still. Another reached for his gun. An arrow struck his wrist. The weapon hit the ground. Ian Crow backed into a wooden table. Kayla. His voice trembled, though he still tried to say it like the name of a child he once owned. It is your father. Kayla stepped out from the shadows. The oil lamp lit her fully now. Her broad muscular frame under torn clothes, old and new scars woven like a map of pain. The faint mark of the rope still visible around her neck. You are no father, she said calmly. You are the man who sold us. Iman looked around and saw the other 4 closing in. His face turned pale. You do not understand. We understand enough. Kayla cut him off. He reached out a hand as if to touch her. His final mistake. Kayla did not step back. She caught his hand, not gently, not with